He had exactly 10 seconds to decide whether telling the truth would cost his daughter her future. The message on his cracked phone screen wasn't dramatic, just 4 words that made his chest lock tight. "We know it was you." He stood in the school parking lot, engine running, watching children spill out of the building, laughing, unaware that one quiet man nearby was being pushed toward a choice that couldn't be undone. If he stayed silent, life would remain hard but predictable. If he spoke up, everything he had built for his child could collapse overnight. This is the story of a single father who never planned to be brave. He wasn't powerful, wealthy, or influential, and no one had ever asked for his opinion on anything that mattered. His days were measured in packed lunches, overdue bills, and the constant calculation of how long he could keep going on too little sleep. Raising a child alone had taught him efficiency, patience, and the art of swallowing fear before it showed on his face. What it had not taught him was how to protect his child from a truth that dangerous people wanted buried. The trouble began with something small, almost invisible, the kind of detail most people would ignore to get through their day. But once he noticed it, he couldn't unsee it, and pretending otherwise felt like lying to the one person who trusted him completely. His child had asked him a simple question the night before, one that carried more weight than any threat he would later receive. That question followed him everywhere, echoing louder each time someone hinted that silence could be rewarded. As pressure closed in, he realized the real risk wasn't losing his job or his safety, but teaching his child the wrong lesson about the kind of person he was. This isn't a story about heroes or villains, but about a father who learns that integrity, once tested, never whispers. It demands an answer. The morning after that unanswered message, nothing looked different from the outside. The sun still rose too early, the air still carried the sharp chill of an unfinished winter, and the city still moved with the indifference of a machine that never slowed for individual fear. Yet for him, everything had shifted, quietly and irrevocably. He woke before the alarm, the way he always did, his body trained by years of responsibility rather than rest. For a moment, lying there in the half-dark, he allowed himself the dangerous luxury of pretending the message hadn't happened. No threats, no watchers, no consequences, waiting patiently for him to make a mistake. Just another morning in a life built on routine. That illusion lasted exactly 3 seconds. From the next room came the soft cough he recognized instantly, the one that meant his child's cold hadn't fully gone away. He swung his legs out of bed, joints stiff, back aching in the familiar way of someone who slept too little and carried too much. The floor was cold beneath his feet as he moved down the narrow hallway, already calculating the day ahead. Work hours, school pickup, grocery money, the medication he still needed to buy. Parenthood, especially alone, had turned his mind into a constant ledger of needs versus means. He pushed open the bedroom door quietly. His child lay curled beneath a blanket decorated with faded cartoon stars, hair sticking out at odd angles, eyes half open in that unfocused way children have when they're awake but not fully present. "Morning," he said softly, forcing warmth into his voice even as his chest felt tight. "I heard you walking," the child said, voice rough with sleep. "You always wake up before the alarm." He smiled, the practiced, gentle kind that asked no questions and offered no worries. "Habit," he replied. "You okay?" A shrug, still tired. "But I can go to school." That was how it always went. The child never complained unless something truly hurt, a resilience learned too early from watching one parent do the work of two. He reached out, brushed hair back from a warm forehead, and nodded. "Let's get you some breakfast first." The kitchen was small, functional, and slightly cluttered with the signs of an unfinished life. A stack of bills sat untouched on the counter. A cracked mug waited by the sink, stained from years of overused coffee. The refrigerator hummed loudly, as if reminding him it still worked. For now. As he moved through the familiar motions, pouring cereal, heating water, slicing fruit. His thoughts refused to stay quiet. The message replayed itself again and again in his mind. Not dramatic, not emotional, just chilling in its simplicity. We know it was you. No context, no signature, no demands, which somehow made it worse. Did something bad happen at work? His child asked suddenly. Spoon paused halfway to their mouth. He froze for half a second too long. What makes you ask that? He said carefully. You're doing the quiet face, the child replied. The one where you think really hard, but don't say anything. That stung more than any threat. Children noticed everything, especially the things adults thought they hid well. He exhaled slowly and chose honesty without danger. Just thinking about grown-up stuff, he said. Nothing you need to worry about. The child studied him, unconvinced but willing to let it go. Okay, but you should drink your coffee before it gets cold. You always forget. He laughed softly, grateful for the small mercy of normal conversation. Thanks for the reminder. By the time they left the apartment, the day had fully begun. Cars filled the streets, people moved with purpose, and somewhere in the city, decisions were being made that would ripple outward without ever acknowledging his existence. He locked the door behind them, tugged his jacket tighter, and walked with his child toward the bus stop. He had never thought of himself as brave. Bravery in his mind belonged to people with choices, people who could afford to lose something. His life had been narrowed by necessity. Every decision filtered through one question: will this keep my child safe? It wasn't noble, it wasn't heroic, it was survival refined into instinct. At work, he kept his head down. He always did. His job existed in the background of larger systems, the kind of role that supported everything while being seen by almost no one. He fixed problems quietly, corrected errors without credit, and made sure things ran smoothly so others could take credit for the results. That anonymity had once felt like protection. Now it felt like exposure. Throughout the morning, he noticed small things he'd never paid attention to before. A coworker who lingered too long near his desk, a supervisor who asked a question and didn't quite meet his eyes, a security camera angled just slightly differently than usual. Paranoia, he told himself. Fear always looked for patterns, but fear, he was learning, was sometimes just awareness arriving late. At lunch, he didn't eat. He sat alone, phone face down on the table, half expecting it to vibrate again. It didn't. The silence was almost worse. That afternoon, as he picked up his child from school, the earlier moment in the parking lot replayed in his mind with sharper clarity. The way the message had arrived at the exact moment he'd been watching children run toward their parents. The way it had forced him to confront a truth he'd been avoiding since the night before. He was already involved, whether he liked it or not. That evening, after homework and dinner and the careful ritual of bedtime, his child hesitated in the doorway. "Can I ask you something?" they said. He looked up from folding laundry. "Of course. If someone does something wrong, but fixing it makes things worse for people you love, what are you supposed to do?" The question hit him like a physical blow. He sat down slowly on the edge of the bed. "Why do you ask that?" The child shrugged, picking at the edge of the blanket. "We talked about fairness at school today, about telling the truth, but sometimes the truth gets people in trouble." He considered his answer carefully. This moment mattered more than any threat. "Sometimes," he said, choosing each word with care, "doing the right thing doesn't make life easier. Sometimes it makes it harder. But if you stop doing the right thing just because you're scared, you lose something inside yourself. And that's very hard to get back." The child nodded slowly, absorbing it. "Okay," they said. "I think I understand." After the light was off and the apartment grew quiet, he sat alone in the kitchen. The city hummed outside the window, indifferent and vast. He picked up his phone and stared at it for a long time. Whatever came next, he knew one thing with certainty. His life was no longer just about endurance. Soon, it would demand a choice. The first time he noticed her, she wasn't doing anything dramatic. She wasn't running, shouting, or hiding. She was simply standing near the side entrance of the building across from his workplace, pretending to scroll through her phone while watching the door reflectively, the way people did when they were waiting for something they didn't want to be seen waiting for. He wouldn't have noticed her at all if it weren't for the way she looked up the moment he passed. Their eyes met for half a second. Then she looked away too quickly, as if eye contact itself had been a mistake. That should have been the end of it. But over the next few days, he saw her again, always near the edges of places where people moved quickly and didn't pay attention, outside a cafe across from the courthouse, near the bus stop by the hospital, once, briefly, near the school parking lot before disappearing behind a row of parked cars. She never approached him, never waved, never spoke, and yet every time there was recognition. By the fourth encounter, he stopped pretending it was coincidence. He didn't confront her. That would have been reckless. Instead, he did what he always did when something felt wrong. He observed quietly, patiently, filing away details like puzzle pieces he wasn't yet ready to assemble. She was tired. Not the casual tired of someone overworked, but the kind that lived behind the eyes, sharp and constant. She wore the same coat every time, a neutral gray that blended into crowds, no jewelry, no visible branding, practical shoes, someone who didn't want to be memorable. The message on his phone remained silent, but its presence lingered like a held breath. We know it was you. He still didn't know who we was, but he was beginning to understand that someone else did. The encounter finally broke its silence on a Thursday evening. He was leaving work later than usual, the sky already darkening, when he heard his name spoken softly behind him. Not shouted, not demanded, spoken. He turned slowly. She stood a few steps back, hands visible, posture careful. Up close, she looked younger than he'd expected, though the exhaustion aged her in subtle ways. Her eyes were sharp, alert, and filled with something that looked dangerously close to relief. I was hoping you'd talk to me, she said. He didn't answer immediately. The street was quiet, but not empty. Traffic passed nearby, distant and steady. I don't know you, he said finally. She nodded. I know. That's the point. That made his stomach tighten. She gestured toward a bench near the bus stop. 5 minutes, she said. If you don't like what I say, you walk away. I won't follow. He hesitated. Every instinct told him this was a bad idea. Another voice, quieter but firmer, reminded him that ignoring reality didn't make it disappear. He sat. She didn't. My name doesn't matter, she said. What matters is that you saw something last week, something you weren't supposed to notice. His jaw tightened. I see a lot of things. Yes, she said softly. You do. That's why this is happening to you. The word happening carried weight. She reached into her coat slowly and pulled out a folded piece of paper, placing it on the bench between them without touching him. I'm an investigative reporter, she said. Or I was. Right now I'm just someone who knows too much and isn't protected by anyone important. He didn't reach for the paper. I don't talk to reporters. I know, she said. You avoid attention. You keep your head down. You don't post. You don't complain. You don't escalate problems. Her accuracy unsettled him. But last week, she continued, you were in the wrong place at the wrong time. You noticed a transfer order that shouldn't exist, a correction that wasn't a correction, a detail that didn't match the official record. His pulse quickened. You didn't report it, she said. You didn't flag it. You didn't mention it to anyone. You just copied it. His silence confirmed everything. She exhaled slowly. That file completes something I've been chasing for 8 months. He stood. This conversation is over. She didn't stop him. Someone is being set up, she said calmly, deliberately. Not a powerful person. Not someone who can fight back, someone who will be blamed quietly so a much larger problem can disappear. He froze. You have children, she added, her voice softer now. I've seen you at the school. He turned back, anger flaring. You don't get to bring my child into this. I don't want to, she said quickly. I want to keep them out of it. That's why I'm talking to you and not the police. That stopped him. You think the police don't already know? She asked. You think systems like this survive without cooperation? The bench felt suddenly unstable beneath him. She finally sat down, leaving space between them. I don't need you to do anything yet, she said. I just need you to understand what you're standing next to. She slid the paper closer. It wasn't a document. It was a timeline. Dates, names, positions quietly reassigned, complaints dismissed, accidents reclassified, patterns. I'm not asking you to be brave, she said. I'm asking you to be honest with yourself. You already are. That's why this is so hard. He stared at the paper without touching it. If you walk away, she continued, they'll find someone else to pin it on, and life will go on. Except for one family. He thought of the question his child had asked. What are you supposed to do? What happens if I help you? He asked quietly. She met his eyes. Then they'll try to scare you. If that doesn't work, they'll try to isolate you. If that fails, they'll make you look unreliable. And you? He asked. A humorless smile touched her lips. They're already doing that to me. He picked up the paper. The weight of it felt disproportionate to its size. I can't protect you, she said, and I can't promise this ends well. All I can promise is that silence won't make it stop. He folded the paper carefully and handed it back. I have a child, he said. Everything I do goes through that. She nodded. Then you understand exactly what's at stake. She stood, stepping back again, restoring distance. I won't contact you again unless you reach out. I won't follow you. I won't show up where you don't expect me. She hesitated, then added, but if you hear from them again, really hear from them, it means you're closer to the truth than they're comfortable with. He watched her walk away, blending into the crowd with practiced ease. That night, as he sat at the kitchen table long after his child had fallen asleep, he replayed every word, every look, every implication. The message on his phone remained unchanged, but now he knew something else. He wasn't alone in this, and whatever choice he made next wouldn't just shape his life. It would decide who paid the price for the lie. The pressure didn't arrive all at once. It crept in quietly, disguising itself as coincidence, inconvenience, and concern. The first sign was work. On Monday morning, his access badge failed at the side entrance. Not locked, just delayed. He stood there an extra 3 seconds while the scanner blinked red, then green, as if reconsidering. A small thing, too small to complain about. Inside, his supervisor greeted him with a smile that didn't quite reach the eyes. Hey, the man said casually. HR wants to review some workflow logs from last week. Routine stuff. Routine, that word again. He nodded, said nothing, and sat at his desk. His computer loaded more slowly than usual. A folder he'd used for years required reauthorization. Someone, somewhere, was paying attention. By lunchtime, the message arrived. Different number, same tone. You're making this harder than it needs to be. No threat, no instructions, just expectation. He didn't reply. That evening, he picked up his child from school as usual. The teacher lingered after dismissal, smiling politely. Just wanted to let you know, she said, we're doing some evaluations next week. Standard check-ins, nothing to worry about. Evaluations for what? He asked. She tilted her head. Wellness, attendance, home environment, you know. No, he didn't know, but he thanked her anyway. At home, the child talked animatedly about a class project, unaware that the walls around their quiet life were beginning to shift. He listened, nodded, asked questions, and cooked dinner with mechanical precision. Later, while washing dishes, he noticed a car idling across the street longer than necessary. When he looked directly at it, it drove away. He slept poorly that night. By Wednesday, the pressure found its voice. His phone rang while he was at work. Unknown number. "This is Child Services," a woman said calmly. "We've received a report requesting a routine follow-up. We'd like to schedule a home visit." His grip tightened around the phone. "A report about what?" he asked. "Concerns regarding supervision and work-life balance," she replied, as if reading from a script. "Nothing alarming, just protocol." "Who made the report?" "I'm not authorized to disclose that." Of course she wasn't. He agreed to the visit because refusing would look like guilt. When he hung up, his hands were shaking. That afternoon, the reporter, the woman from the bench, texted him for the first time. "It's starting, isn't it?" He didn't respond. At home, the child noticed. "You're doing the quiet face again," they said. He knelt down, meeting their eyes. "Hey, I need you to listen to me for a second." They nodded solemnly. "Some people might ask you questions soon," he said carefully, "about our home, about me, about how we live." "Like teachers?" the child asked. "Like helpers," he said. "Harvesti. Their job is to make sure kids are safe." "I am safe," the child said immediately. "I know," he replied, heart twisting. "And that's what matters. If they ask you anything, you just tell the truth, okay?" The child frowned. "Truth about what?" He hesitated, then answered honestly, "About us." The child studied him for a long moment. "Did you do something bad?" The question hurt more than any threat. "No," he said firmly, "I didn't." "Then why are you scared?" He swallowed. "Because sometimes doing the right thing makes people uncomfortable." That night, the reporter called. "I didn't want to involve your family," she said, "but they're escalating." "I can handle pressure," he replied. "I can't handle them touching my child." "That's the point," she said softly. "They know exactly where your line is." "What do you want from me?" he asked. "Nothing yet," she said. "Just don't let them isolate you. That's how this works. They make you feel alone, ashamed, unsure of your own reality." "I don't feel alone," he said, though it felt like a lie. The home visit happened on Friday. The woman from Child Services was polite, professional, and observant. She asked about routines, meals, schoolwork, discipline. The child answered confidently, honestly, proudly. "Yes, my dad works a lot," they said, "but he always comes back. He reads to me every night unless I fall asleep first." The woman smiled, taking notes. In the kitchen, she lowered her voice. "You're doing well," she said. "This visit will be documented as compliant." Relief washed through him, briefly. "But," she added, "you should know these reports don't come out of nowhere. Someone is concerned enough to keep watching." After she left, he sat at the table staring at the wood grain, tracing patterns with his finger. That evening, the message returned. "We offered you silence. You chose attention." This time it came with an attachment, a scanned document, a performance review he'd never seen. Concerns noted, reliability questioned, language carefully neutral, professionally damning. He closed his eyes. At bedtime, the child hugged him tighter than usual. "Are we in trouble?" they whispered. "No," he said, holding them close. "We're okay. Promise?" He hesitated just long enough. "I promise I'll do everything I can to keep us okay." After the child fell asleep, he sat in the dark living room and finally called the reporter back. "I'm in," he said quietly. She didn't sound relieved. She sounded resigned. "Then we need to be careful," she said, "because once you cross the line they've drawn, there's no going back." "What happens now?" he asked. "Now," she said, they try to break you without touching you, and you decide whether the truth is worth the cost." He looked down the hallway toward his child's room. "It is," he said, "but I need to do this my way." Silence on the line. "Tell me your way," she said. He took a breath. "No grand gestures," he said. "No heroics. just facts, quietly placed where they can't be erased. She smiled, even though he couldn't see it. That's exactly how systems like this fall, she said. Not with noise, with patience. He ended the call and stared out the window. The city lights blinked steadily. Unaware, he didn't feel brave, he felt terrified. But beneath the fear was something firmer. Resolve. He didn't act immediately. That was the hardest part. Every instinct screamed at him to do something, to confront, to expose, to demand answers. But instinct was emotional, and emotion was exactly what the system relied on to discredit people like him. So instead, he waited. Waiting became an act of discipline. He went to work, he packed lunches, he helped with homework. He nodded at coworkers who suddenly spoke more carefully around him, as if afraid of being overheard saying the wrong thing in his presence. Behind the scenes, he documented everything, not on his work computer, not on his phone. He used an old laptop he'd nearly thrown away years ago, the screen dim and unreliable, but disconnected from any system that could be monitored. Each night after his child fell asleep, he transferred copies of records he was still authorized to access. Logs, timestamps, discrepancies that proved intent rather than error. He didn't keep everything, only what mattered. The reporter guided him carefully, never asking him to do more than he already had. Less is safer, she reminded him. Patterns speak louder than volume. They communicated sparingly. Short calls, encrypted messages, no emotion, no speculation, just facts. The retaliation escalated anyway. His supervisor called him into a meeting on a Tuesday afternoon. Budget cuts, the man said, avoiding eye contact. Your position is being restructured. Restructured was a polite word for erased. He was offered a demotion framed as an opportunity for flexibility, fewer hours, lower pay, no access to sensitive systems. He declined. That night, he told his child the truth, carefully edited, stripped of fear. I might be working less for a while, he said. Things might feel different. Are we moving? The child asked, eyes wide. No, he said quickly. Nothing like that. Okay, they said, trusting him in the way only children could. As long as you're still here. That word, here, echoed long after bedtime. 2 days later, child services returned. This time, they weren't smiling. The second visit was colder, more formal, more questions, more notes. When they left, the apartment felt smaller. That evening, the reporter called. They know you're not backing down, she said. They're trying to exhaust you. I can handle it, he replied, though his voice wavered. I know, she said gently, but this is the part where you lose things you don't get back. He lost his job the following Monday. Officially, it was due to restructuring and performance concerns. Unofficially, everyone knew. Coworkers avoided his eyes as he cleaned out his desk. Security escorted him, not aggressively, but unmistakably. He didn't argue. He didn't protest. He walked out with a cardboard box and a calm he didn't feel. The real loss came later that night. He sat at the kitchen table, bills spread out in front of him, calculator blinking uselessly. Savings were thin, options thinner. The child watched him quietly. Did they fire you? They asked. Yes, he said. Because you did the right thing? He looked up sharply. What makes you think that? The child shrugged. You look sad, but not ashamed. You only look like that when you're sad for good reasons. He closed his eyes. Yes, he said, because I did the right thing. The child nodded, satisfied. Okay, they said. Then we'll be okay. He wasn't sure that was true. The breaking point came a week later. He returned home to find a notice taped to the door. Not an eviction, not yet, but a warning about overdue payments and potential consequences. Inside, the apartment was untouched, but something felt wrong. His laptop was exactly where he'd left it. Too exactly. He opened it. Everything was gone. No files, no backups, no evidence. Panic surged, sharp and disorienting. Then his phone rang. Unknown number. He answered. You should have taken the offer, a man's voice said calmly. Now things are getting complicated. You broke into my home. he said, anger cutting through fear. We corrected a misunderstanding, the voice replied. You had information that didn't belong to you. Then you know you're guilty. A pause. Guilt is irrelevant, the man said. Control is what matters. The call ended. He stood in the silent apartment, shaking. When the reporter answered his frantic call, she wasn't surprised. They do this, she said. Erase you before you can speak. I lost everything, he said. My job. My proof. Not everything, she replied. You gave me copies. He sank into a chair. You're sure? Yes, she said. And now we move. What does that mean? It means publication, she said, carefully, anonymously, slowly. Fear clawed at his chest. They'll come after my child. They already tried, she said, and they failed, because you documented everything properly. Silence stretched between them. You still have time to walk away, she added. It will cost you less than staying. He looked toward the hallway where his child slept. No, he said quietly. I won't teach them that silence is the price of safety. The first article dropped 2 days later. It didn't name names. It didn't accuse outright. It laid out timelines, showed patterns, asked questions no one wanted to answer. The reaction was immediate and vicious. Commentators dismissed it. Officials denied everything. Anonymous sources attacked the credibility of unnamed insiders. His name wasn't mentioned, but the pressure intensified. More calls, more warnings. One night, as he tucked his child into bed, they asked, Are the bad people mad at you? He hesitated, then answered honestly, Yes. Are you scared? Yes. The child reached out, gripping his hand tightly. Me too, they whispered. But I'm glad you didn't lie. He held on to that as the ground beneath his life continued to shift. The reporter sent him a message late that night. It's working, slowly. People are paying attention. He stared at the words for a long time. He had lost stability, income, peace, but he hadn't lost himself, and that, he realized, was the one thing they couldn't take. The aftermath didn't arrive with sirens or apologies. It came quietly, the way consequences usually did. In the weeks that followed the first article, life did not improve in any obvious way. No job offers appeared in his inbox. No official acknowledgement came from the institutions named between the lines. The bills did not pause out of respect for integrity, and the landlord did not care why payments arrived late. But something had shifted. The phone stopped ringing at night. The anonymous messages ceased. The car that once idled too long across the street never returned. Pressure, he learned, had a lifespan. It thrived on silence, fear, and isolation. Once exposed to daylight, even imperfectly, it weakened. The reporter published again and again. Each piece was careful, restrained, and meticulously sourced. Each one added weight without spectacle. Names began to surface, not accusations but questions too precise to ignore. Committees were formed, internal reviews announced, public statements crafted in language so neutral it bordered on meaningless. Nothing fell dramatically, but nothing went back to the way it was. He found work eventually. Not better work, not stable work, but enough. Temporary contracts, night shifts, jobs that paid less than what he'd lost but asked fewer questions. He adjusted. He always did. Some nights after his child fell asleep, he sat at the kitchen table and allowed himself to feel the exhaustion he'd been postponing. Not the physical kind, that was familiar, but the deeper fatigue of someone who had stood still while the ground moved beneath him. One evening, his child joined him quietly, dragging a blanket behind them. You're still awake, they said. So are you, he replied gently. They climbed onto the chair across from him, wrapping the blanket around their shoulders like a cape. Are we safe now, they asked. He considered the question carefully. We're safer than we were, he said. But safety isn't something you win forever, it's something you take care of. The child nodded, accepting this with the solemnity of someone growing faster than they should. Did the bad people lose? They asked. He shook his head. No, he said, they're still there. The child frowned. Then why did you do it? He leaned back, studying the ceiling as if the answer might be written there. Because, he said slowly, sometimes the most important thing isn't making bad people lose. It's making sure they don't get to decide who you become. The child smiled faintly. I like that answer. At school, the questions stopped. The evaluations concluded without comment. Life resumed its rhythm, altered but intact. Occasionally, he caught glimpses of the ripple effects. A news segment mentioning an internal audit, a quiet resignation reported without explanation, a policy revised, its origins unacknowledged. The reporter sent fewer messages now. When she did, they were different. You should know, one read. Someone higher up is asking questions that didn't exist before. Another, they won't say your name, but they know what changed. He didn't feel victorious. He felt steady. Months later, he ran into her by chance, the reporter, at a small bookstore near the bus stop. She looked healthier, less hunted. They exchanged a nod. Nothing more. That was enough. One evening, as autumn settled in and the city softened around the edges, his child came home with a drawing. It showed two figures standing side by side, one smaller, one taller. Above them, in careful, uneven letters, were the words, "My dad tells the truth." He stared at it longer than he meant to. What do you think? The child asked, suddenly unsure. He cleared his throat. I think, he said, it's the most important thing anyone's ever drawn for me. Later that night, after the lights were off and the apartment quiet, he stood by the window and watched the city glow. He thought about everything he'd lost, the security, the predictability, the illusion that staying quiet guaranteed safety. He thought about what he'd kept, his child's trust, his own reflection, the knowledge that when the moment came, he hadn't looked away. The world had not changed dramatically because of him. No headlines bore his name, no monument marked his choice, but somewhere a system had hesitated, a lie had been delayed, a line had been drawn quietly, firmly, by someone who was never supposed to matter. And in a small apartment, a child slept peacefully, believing that the truth, while costly, was never something to be ashamed of. He turned off the light and went to bed. Tomorrow would be another ordinary day, and that he knew now was not something to take for granted. In the end, nothing about his life looked heroic from the outside. There were no awards, no public apologies, and no moment where the world paused to acknowledge what he had done. He was still a single father counting expenses, still waking up early, still carrying responsibility like a second spine. But something essential had changed, something that could not be taken back or erased. He had proven, first to himself and then to his child, that fear did not get the final vote. The truth had cost him comfort, stability, and the illusion of safety, yet it had given him something far more durable. It gave him the ability to stand still in difficult moments without looking away. It taught his child that doing the right thing is not about winning, but about refusing to become smaller to survive. The world remained imperfect, and powerful systems continued to protect themselves. But a quiet boundary had been drawn. Within that boundary lived a simple, stubborn integrity that no threat had managed to break. Some stories end with victory, others with loss, but this one ends with continuity. A father still showing up, a child still trusting him, and an ordinary life made meaningful, not by comfort, but by choice.